everybody, today I'm going to show you how to paint a watercolour bird using only 3 colours. I'm using Payne's Grey, Ochre and Burnt Umber, but you can use whatever paints that you have in these colours. You'll also need at least one paintbrush. I'm using this fake squirrel hair brush by Princeton called Neptune. You'll also need some paper, ideally watercolour paper, as it's thick enough to absorb and hold the paint, and comes in beautiful textures. It's been a weird week for the weather, but as ever I've been looking out the window and taking pictures of lovely garden birds that I can see in our garden. I think this cute fella might be either a female blackbird or a thrush. Let me know what you think in the comments. Today I'm going to be painting a thrush from a picture of one that I took previously. Now we have our reference photo, we can begin to just draw a basic outline. I normally start off with the head and then work outwards to get the body in. The main thing being obviously working with proportion and just basically putting shapes down on the page until you have something that generally resembles a bird. By using a pencil you can always rub out anything that you're not happy with, and what we'll do is when we've painted the bird we'll probably end up rubbing out some of the pencil marks anyway. Your bird could look something like this. It probably seems counterintuitive, but once I've done that, I like to just lightly remove some of the pencil marks, just so when I put the paint on, the pencil marks don't show through quite as strongly. We can now begin to paint the bird, and I'm just starting by just wetting the page with a little bit of water, not too much water, you don't want to sort of drown the poor thing, but just adding a bit of water, as we're going to be doing what we're calling the wet on wet technique. This is a common technique known in watercolour. So as you can see, I've wet parts of the bird and I'm starting off with the darkest colour I can see, which is like a sort of the dark burnt umber brown colour. And I'm just gently sort of adding some splashes of paint in, and as you can see it's called wet on wet because I'm adding wet paint into the water, and what you get here is a lovely mix of effects when the water and paint mix together. I'm now going to take the ochre colour, which is a nice sort of dusky yellow colour, and again I'm going to wet the page where I want the yellow colour to be. Then I'm going to wet my brush and dab that into some of the paint. And as you can see, I'm just adding little bits of paint where I want them, very lightly, so I'm not actually using a great deal of paint here, just a very little bit. The thing with watercolour is you don't want to generally always paint very strongly. I like to obviously get the very subtle, soft layers. I like to start with a very thin layer of pale paint, and then what you can then do is add some of the stronger colour on top of that. So then you get this real mix of light and stronger colours, which can be really nice for sort of capturing lighter colours as well as sort of areas where light is shining. What's quite nice about using very, very thin pale layers too is that they do dry very quickly. So I'm now starting to go back in and add some more of this darker burnt umber colour, just to add a bit of contrast, start to get some of those layers building. Always think about layers with watercolour. If you have to sit and wait between layers to dry, that's better than sort of adding too much paint and making it look too thick and heavy. Because then you're not really working with what the paint can offer you. As you can see, I also added a thin layer of the Payne's Grey for the underside area of the bird, and what I then did was just wait for that whole thing to dry before coming back to it now. So now, as step 3, I'm adding a second layer of paint onto that first dry layer. This time I haven't wet the page. What I've done is I'm just adding a bit of wet paint straight on top of what I've already painted. So this is a nice way of starting to add some more of the details of the bird and sort of characteristics that you normally see in the bird. With a thrush here, it's got a very speckled chest, so I'm just basically lightly dabbing on wet paint. So you could call this the wet on dry technique, I suppose. I'm adding wet paint onto the dry paint that's dried, and just generally doing it quite randomly. I'm not worried about making it entirely accurate. Again, I'm just doing a general impression. That's the kind of loose style that I like to work with, but if you want to do this super accurately, you can totally do that. It's entirely up to you. As you can see, the bird is now taking shape, so I'm now just going in and adding some general fine details, such as around the feet, and as well as around the bird's beak. And I'm mainly doing that using the burnt umber for more shadowy areas, plus on the beak here I'm using a bit of the Payne's grey, and of course in the bird's eye to really get those sort of dark tones coming through. I'm leaving like a tiny little bit where there's a reflection in the bird's eye, and it's easier to leave a gap rather than try to sort of add a white glint later on. I'm also putting some darker bits in areas such as the bird's feathers, as well as the speckles on the underside of the bird, as well as around the bird's face. For the final step, I'm just going to paint a bit of the background by focusing on what the bird is standing on. So I'm going to loosely just paint just a few brush strokes just to give the impression of the fence or piece of wood that the bird might be standing on. I'm also doing some gentle, delicate, small paint splashes in the background, just to fill in a bit of the background and give a bit of a sense of movement. Don't forget to sign your work, as you never know just how valuable your work could be one day. Maybe do this in pencil and go over it if you prefer. Here you have it, the finished piece. You can really see it was really worth taking the time to build up all those layers. Even if you have a break for a cup of tea while you're waiting, it's worth not rushing this process. Thank you for watching this tutorial, and be sure to give it a like if you enjoyed it. Let me know in the comments what you would like to see next, maybe an oil tutorial, watercolour, or maybe something else. Be sure to click the subscribe button so that you don't miss out on any future tutorials. In the meantime, you can follow my art journey on my social media pages on Facebook, Instagram and Twitter at Gemma Johnson Art. If you have a go at the tutorial, feel free to share your creations with me using the hashtag Let's Paint over on Instagram. You could also join our Facebook art club group, Lincoln and Beyond Let's Paint. Thank you for watching and happy painting!